What's up, everyone? Welcome back. So I just got my credit card statement in the mail, and wow, for the first time ever, I was actually pleasantly surprised at my credit card statement. You know, there's not many good things that you can say about the coronavirus lockdown, but if there was something good to say about it, it's that you're probably not spending a lot of money. A lot of places are on lockdown, so you can't go out to eat, you can't go on vacation, you can't go out to concerts or anything like that. So there's very limited things that you can actually spend your money on. So I thought, what better time to make a video about saving for those people who are interested in getting their nest egg built up a little bit. Hopefully you've still got your job, you haven't been laid off, or if you have, hopefully the extra unemployment and stimulus checks are covering all of your expenses, and so we can start on actually saving and building up a nest egg while we're on lockdown and not really spending a lot of money. So let's get started with the 7 tips of where your money should go. Number 1, fund your retirement account. I suggest anywhere between 5 and 15% of your total paycheck should be going into some sort of a retirement account. If you're living in America, that might be a 401k, if your job has such a program, or maybe an IRA, something like that. And you're gonna want this to be your actual total income. This is before you take out any sort of expenses for rent and food and that kind of stuff. You wanna make sure that you're setting aside enough money for retirement. So if your job does have a 401k at work and it has a matching contribution system set up for it, I highly recommend contributing enough money to fully take advantage of that employer match. That is essentially free money up to that contribution match. Once you've maxed out that match for a 401k, I'm usually not a huge fan of 401ks in general, because I think IRAs are much more flexible with your money. You dictate where your money is being invested as opposed to the 401k plan provider that you have. So I highly recommend investing in that 401k up to the match, but then once you have maxed out that match, try to invest into an IRA instead of continuing to dump money into your 401k. This will give you more flexibility and theoretically higher returns. Step 2. So any money that's not dedicated towards that retirement account is going to then be funneled into your checking account. And realistically, this is where most people stop the process. They don't make it to step 7, they just get stuck on step 2. Maybe they didn't even complete step 1. So the primary point of your checking account is this is going to be sort of the base of operations of where all your money gets funneled. So you want to make sure that you have easy access to your money in this checking account. This is going to be where you pay all of your bills for and that kind of stuff. And so instead of worrying about trying to pick the bank that has the absolute highest interest rate, you want to make sure that it's convenient for you. Not only do you have good online access, but also physical access with local stores and branches. So for example, Chase Bank does not have a single actual location in the state of North Carolina, and that's where I'm at. So for me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to use Chase Bank, even though they have a lot of online stuff. If I do have a problem, there's nobody that I can actually go and talk to in person to sort that stuff out. So find a good bank that's gonna take good care of you, and this is gonna be your base of operations. So once you find a good bank that you want to use for your checking account, it's time to move on to step 3, and that's to list out all of your bills in terms of needs versus wants. Now when I say needs, this is truly essential items. So we're talking about things like your mortgage or your rent if you're renting, food, utilities, transportation, healthcare, that kind of stuff. We're talking about the bare essentials for you to survive on. So this is not going to be things like your iPhone or Netflix subscriptions. These are truly items that you physically cannot do without. All of those other things are niceties, they are wants, and by all means, it's great to have some wants, but you need to be able to distinguish between what is necessary versus what is nice to have. Because everybody wants to have more money, and yet we all run around with $1,000 iPhones in our pocket and wonder why we don't have any money. Now, it's very important that you have an emergency fund because according to Murphy's Law, bad things happen. And they always happen at the worst possible time. So you want to have a set of money set aside where in a truly emergency type of situation, you have something to go to that'll get you through those rough times. So this is going to be, like I said, for true emergencies only. This is going to be if you lose your job, if your car breaks down, or if you have an unexpected medical expense that you absolutely have to take care of. So this is not money to go out to a concert with or for a future vacation or anything like that. This is money that is going to get set aside and hopefully you never have to touch it again. And an emergency fund is important because if you don't have an emergency fund and an unexpected expense comes up, like let's say your transmission in your car goes out, then for most people, the only way that they can fix their car is to simply put that item on a credit card. And as we know, credit cards have the highest interest rate imaginable. So you are getting screwed financially on that interest. But besides getting screwed on the interest, it's also a psychological thing. A lot of people stress out about these unexpected expenses. They're wondering, how am I gonna pay for it and that kind of stuff. And that kind of stress can lead to some very negative consequences in our lives, both in our financial lives, but also in our just general well-being. So by having an emergency fund, something where we already have money set aside for these emergencies, it relieves all that pressure, all that stress. And so when these items do come up, these emergencies do come up, we can just simply pay it and move on instead of freaking out and start worrying about everything. So personally, I suggest give or take about $2,500 is a nice emergency fund. Some people suggest a little bit more, some a little bit less, but if you can't get to $2,500, that's fine. Get to $1,000, get to $500, get to whatever it is that you can. Ideally $2,500 because I think that that's a pretty safe number for most things. If your car breaks down or medical expenses, $2,500 will cover the majority of one-time events. So if you have at least this amount, it should theoretically be able to get you through it. Now it's time to tackle all of that extra debt that we have. So we've already made the bare minimum payments on what other kind of loans we have, maybe a mortgage, auto loans, student loans, credit card debt, etc. So we've at minimum taken care of the minimum balance on all of these things. And now it's time to tackle the rest of that debt. Now when it comes to tackling this debt, realistically there's two primary schools of thought, either the snowball method of paying off this extra debt or the avalanche method of paying off your debt. So with the snowball method, what you are going to want to do is focus on whatever bill you have that you owe the least amount of money on. This is not taking into effect your interest rate or anything like that. The only thing that you are looking at is what is the total amount of money that you owe for this particular bill. So maybe you have an auto loan that you owe an extra $1,600 on, or a credit card that you owe $10,000 on. In this case, you would want to focus primarily on that auto loan, that smaller amount, and pay that off as rapidly as possible. So the logic behind this snowball method is it's a psychological game where you are seeing some immediate results, because some people, they kind of lose interest, and saving money only works if you are consistent. It's kind of like going to the gym. A lot of people around New Year's, they make a resolution and they're like, this is the year, I'm gonna get in shape, I'm gonna get fit. And then come February, they're not going to the gym anymore. They lose their motivation, they don't see those immediate results, they don't immediately have six-pack abs and bulging biceps, so they just give up. So with this method, by paying off and focusing on your smallest bills first and getting rid of those, it gives us that psychological feedback where now we have eliminated some of our bills, and it helps us to keep motivated towards paying off the rest of those bills. So maybe we started off originally with 5 total loans. Maybe we had a mortgage, credit card bills, auto loans, student loans, whatever the case may be. And as soon as we pay off that first one very, very rapidly, now we've only got 4 left. And so that's gonna, like I said, give us that motivation to keep on going. And once we are down to 4, then you're gonna go and move on to your next smallest bill. And you're gonna completely pay that one off. And you're just gonna keep on going in ascending order with your next higher and higher total bill. So that is sort of the preferred method for people that need a little motivation. They need a little kick in the butt to stay motivated and stay hyped up about saving. But if you are dedicated and you have that internal self-discipline, then you might want to look at the avalanche method of paying off your debt. So statistically and mathematically, this is the superior way to pay off your debt, assuming that you can actually stick with it psychologically. So under the avalanche method, instead of focusing on the smallest dollar amount of the bill, what we are going to focus on is the highest interest rate of whatever that loan is. So if you have a student loan and you're paying 4%, I don't know what a student loan is, but if you're paying 4% on a student loan versus 20% on a credit card, well, then you're going to want to pay off that credit card balance first. And then once you have paid off that highest interest rate loan, which is almost universally going to be your credit cards, you are then going to move on to your next highest interest rate debt that you have, and you're going to slowly work your way down to your cheapest debt, which might be your mortgage. Now, it's important to note that regardless of which method you choose, the avalanche or the snowball, you must make at least the minimum payments on all of your bills. Don't fall behind and go into collections on any of these accounts. So at minimum, pay the minimum balance on each of these accounts, and then tackle the one account that you are focusing on full steam ahead and work on that one after you have paid the minimum on all of your balances. Step 6, you're going to want to create an extended emergency fund. So if you were able to save $2,500, that's fantastic. That's a great emergency fund. But that's not going to help you in a situation where there's a prolonged downturn. Maybe you get severely hurt, so you're not able to work, or you get laid off, or the economy sucks and you got fired. Whatever the situation is, now we're looking for a more long-term approach for your emergency fund. Now, when it comes to this emergency fund, I usually suggest anywhere between 3 to 6 months of total salary stuck away in a very safe and easily accessible area. And the exact amount that you're going to want to have tucked away is going to be relative to your total income and also your overall net worth. If you have money that you can pull from other investments easily, maybe you don't need quite as much money in cash in this emergency fund. Now, I read an interesting article about Bill Gates, and this happened years ago, but investors, they wanted Microsoft's stock price to continually go up. They wanted dividends to go up and all that kind of stuff. They wanted to make a bunch of money for themselves. But Bill Gates was more focused on the actual health of the company itself. He wanted to make sure that the company had enough money on hand to get it through any sort of a downturn. So what he did is he made sure that the Microsoft company had at least 1 year's worth of expenses readily available as cash. That way, if, let's say, they released a new product and it didn't do as well as they hoped for, they could still pay their employees, they could still pay their rent, they could still pay their bills for a full year, so that it wasn't such a huge financial loss if the slightest little hiccup happened and they didn't make as much revenue in that particular quarter as they were hoping for. And I think that's very evident, especially now with the coronavirus going around. We hear stories about companies like the Cheesecake Factory, billion-dollar companies that are already declaring that they're not paying their April's rent. the very first month that something bad happened, and they are already declaring, we're not paying it. So you want to make sure that you have money set aside so that you can actually weather these downturns instead of just simply immediately defaulting on all of your obligations. So when it comes to putting money into your long-term emergency fund, you can put it either into a high-yield savings account, which is what I use. You can use money markets, you can use short-term bonds, whatever it is that you're interested in. Personally, I use personal capital cash system. Up until the coronavirus, they were paying about 2% interest, and that's going to basically keep up with inflation. I used them as opposed to some of the other online companies simply because I already used personal capital. I think it's a great product to track your overall net worth. If you're interested, I've got a link down below. You can get set up with that. But you're going to want something that's going to actually earn you a little bit of interest, because if you have between 3 and 6 months worth of expenses here, you're going to have a relatively significant amount of money. So you want to, at minimum, be able to keep up with inflation. But at the same time, you want to make sure that these funds are easily accessible. That way, if there is a life event where you need this money, you don't have to worry about selling off assets. Step 7, investing. So this is where the real wealth is going to be created. Up until this point, we have been playing it relatively defensively, where in a worst case situation, we're able to make it through. Now it's time to flip the switch and go offensive. So with investing, this is where your money now starts working for you and starts generating more money. And compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world, and this is what is going to provide you with that lifestyle that you're actually interested in. So when it comes to investing, there's a number of different avenues that you can go down. You can invest in stocks, real estate, bonds, pretty much anything that you're interested in. If your stomach allows for it, you can try to go with a little bit more risky investments, maybe cryptocurrency or something like that. But you need to come up with an investing strategy that works for you. And that's going to be dependent on your age, your income, your level of risk tolerance, your lifestyle, etc. Now, depending on what you invest in, let's just say you pick the stock market and you invest in a broad index fund. That way you limit your exposure to any one particular sector. Overall, the stock market has averaged, give or take, about 10% per year once you include dividends. Now, obviously that fluctuates significantly from a year-to-year basis, but over the long term, if we expand our time horizon out long enough, we should be able to expect roughly a 10% return. So if we are able to eventually save up and get $1 million in the stock market, then theoretically that money should average about a $100,000 per year gain. Now, some people choose to skip to this stage a little bit earlier than others. Maybe you don't fully pay off all of your debt that you had, especially if it's a super low interest item. If you're only paying 3 or 4% on a mortgage, then it might make sense based on your particular risk tolerance level to start investing and hope to earn 10% as opposed to only paying 3% interest on that mortgage. So in a perfect world, you're earning sort of that spread, that 7% spread, where it makes it more beneficial to start investing immediately as opposed to paying off some of these super low interest rate items. But once again, that is all dependent on your particular level of risk tolerance. There is definitely something to be said about being completely debt-free to include your house, and that gives you a very good peace of mind. It gives you that confidence to go out and potentially invest a little bit more aggressively because you have no existing debts, nothing holding you back, so you can maybe invest a little bit more aggressively. So there you guys go, my 7-step method to not only get out of debt, but start saving and investing. So if you thought this information was useful, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment down below. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm and helps channels like this grow. And as always, I'll see you all again next week.